Hey all, Grolo here. I'm coming at you today with a deep dive into a pretty hot topic, cheating. I'd be surprised if you hadn't seen a bazillion videos on cheating by now in all your favorite MMOs. Go to YouTube and search for cheating in Star Citizen or cheating in Ashes of Creation, cheating in Dune Awakening, probably a host of others. And you'll find plenty of videos about each game, all published relatively recently. Don't worry, I'm not going to clip or react to any of these. This video is one for the reaction haters. Anyway, if you visit Reddit or community forums, you'll probably walk away feeling like every game is dying under the oppressive weight and onslaught of cheaters. Well, we're here to take a more balanced and thorough look at this topic. We're going to dig into the architecture and look at where and how problems can arise, some ways that we can combat them, and why there's no such thing as a silver bullet. Remember, everything is a trade-off, after all. Before we dig in, let me start by saying I'm not a security expert, I'm not a game dev. Security is one of the many areas I've worked around as a system architect. I have a good grasp on trust as a concept in system design, and if you're familiar with the 3A's, that's authentication, authorization, and accounting, I have built many things that have served in all three capacities. With that said, I'm not certain why the cheating thing is seeing such a surge recently. I assume it's related to some cheating as a service gaining popularity or something along those lines, but I could be wrong. And to anyone who is involved in the cheating industry and or making it more accessible to people, I have a message for you. With that said, let's break out our old friend, the whiteboard. I've gone ahead and pre-drawn the foundation of our discussion here. We have a game server, a client machine, connected to its router. We have a player and the owner of those two devices, and the whole internet in between them and the game server. We're going to zoom in and out of this doodle and discuss each of these things. But before we do, let's talk about trust and authority. You've probably heard the terms server authority, client authority. When someone says a game employs server authority for something, it means that the server is computing the outcome of something. Another way of saying it is that the client is not trusted. If you hear that a certain game or system employs client authority, it can also be read that the server is trusting the client to compute something. I wanted to get that out there because you may hear me using these terms interchangeably throughout this video. Let's jump right into a real-world example. Let's consider everyone's favorite cheat, the speed hack. A speed hack involves a player's character or vehicle or something in-game moving faster than it should be able to, right? These types of exploits are rampant right now in Ashes of Creation and Dune Awakening. I'm not sure if this one's rampant in Star Citizen right now or not. I've heard about teleportation in Star Citizen, but it doesn't matter. Imagine we're playing a purely client authoritative game. Let's assume that you're playing this game and it just trusts the client to tell it where it is. Right? So as you're moving, the client is constantly sending updates to the server about its velocity, its direction, its position, etc. Well, in this world, it's pretty simple to speed hack. You write a program that peeks into the memory location where those values are stored on a routine basis, and you increment them by more than they should be, and bam, you're moving faster than everyone. Or you could tamper with the network packets as they leave your PC and update the position there. If you can reverse engineer the network protocol that the game uses. There's a bunch of ways that you can go, and all of it just works because the server trusts you completely. This would be a pretty terrible competitive game to play. Now let's consider the counterexample. Let's say we're playing a game where location is entirely server authoritative. The server does not trust us at all. It only allows us to tell it things like, I'm turning to the right, or I'm turning to the left. I'm pushing the accelerator. I'm pushing the brake. And then the server calculates everything based on those inputs, and it tells us what our position is. If we tell it that we're turning to the right, it calculates how far based on the agility of our vessel or our character, and if we tell it we're accelerating, it computes how much based on our engine or our strength or something, right? And so on and so forth. Now, a real-world example of this kind of movement, you could probably find in a game like EVE Online. In that game, if you've ever played it, you know that you dispatch commands to the server like, orbit this object at 3 kilometers, or align to this object, and the game server handles the rest, right? It's hard to speed hack in a game like that. Your only recourse would be finding bugs in the server code, which are far easier for the devs team to patch and shut that exploit down indefinitely. So, server authority sounds far superior to client authority, right? In our client authority example, I mean, we were able to do whatever we wanted right out the gate. Not so fast. Remember that we are making trade-offs. Servers are far from, like, they're distance-wise, they're far from your PC. Hundreds, maybe thousands of miles. Now imagine if you're playing Call of Duty and you have to tell the server that you are accelerating your character's legs, and you're turning to the right, and you're aiming down the sights. And you have to wait for the server to respond back with your new character position. If the latency was even 100 milliseconds, it'd feel pretty terrible. You'd experience a constant disconnect between issuing input and feeling the impact of that input. Have you ever tried the cloud gaming services with latency-sensitive games? I honestly haven't tried any lately, so I don't know how much better they've gotten, but early on, I tried the early incarnations of these things, and they suffered from this feeling immensely. Like, you know, I was always, as I was using my controller or keyboard or whatever, the responsiveness, it always just felt like a little off. And that's what you'd be setting yourself up for if you were playing like a highly latency-sensitive Twitch reaction type game, and relying on a server authority to tell you position. Wouldn't work too well. Now, okay, so we just quickly looked at two extremes for one type of exploit. Now, as you well know, there's all sorts of exploits, and there's all sorts of ways companies try to straddle the best of both worlds between client and server authority. But at the end of the day, if something is not truly server authoritative, then you are trusting the client. Anything else you do is just trying to protect yourself from that decision. But there's good reasons to make that decision. And it mainly has to do with the feel of the game and player experience. When I jerk my mouse, I want the screen to update in nanoseconds. When I press W to move forward, I want 0 latency, right? Any kind of input lag is simply intolerable in a game like Call of Duty or even Star Citizen whenever I'm on the ground and I'm moving around. Now maybe someday this will be a non-issue. Maybe someday we will all have game servers so close to us that the speed of light is enough to give us this experience that we want while being able to enjoy 100% server authority that basically eliminates all cheating. But that day is not today. And so for now, we got to seek middle grounds. Let's say we want to use server authority everywhere except where we have the most demanding latency concerns. I would imagine this is where most MMOs are today. I don't know for sure, but yeah, we're gonna say that we will do all the item and inventory management server side, all the banking, deposits, withdrawals, so on and so forth. Like all that's gonna be managed. Complete server authority. We're going to calculate the damage from hits, from weapons, and the loss of health. We'll do all that server side. We certainly don't want to trust the clients to calculate and send us their damage numbers. But when it comes to the client moving around the world, you know, moving their mouse, changing their view, pressing W, moving forward, we're going to have to make some concessions. So let's agree that we're going to allow the client to calculate its position and when it's shooting or swinging and all that stuff. We might even get more clever in a game like Star Citizen. We may say we'll accept client calculated position for FPS mode when the character's moving around, but we will switch to complete server authority for ship movement, right? Latency whenever you're on a ship and you're steering the ship, it might be a little bit less noticeable, right? Like the client can say we're accelerating and braking, and we can send back the results of that maybe. Like maybe that'll work out. I don't know for sure. I'm kind of winging this, but I could see it being a problem for like strafing or rolling. Like you're going to want kind of that to feel instantaneous. So maybe some kind of like hybrid solution where we trust the client to calculate the orientation of the ship, but we calculate its position in space based on orientation plus acceleration commands. Something like that. Like, I'm getting further in the weeds than we really need to, but it's still a useful conversation because hopefully you're getting the feel for like the decision making here, right? Like, you want to retain authority over everything you possibly can. You only want to give up the authority on what you absolutely must. Okay, so we've only given up player position. Now, how do we prevent speed hacks and clipping hacks and allow you that, we don't want players like passing through walls. We'd really like to avoid aimbotting and all the fun things that come with trusting the client for these things. Let's start by looking at where the client can break into our logic and override the normal calculations of our game code. There's 4 primary attack vectors. The client PC itself, right here, that's one. The network, which, there's actually a cable between your PC and your router, between your router and internet, between the internet and a game server. Like that's all the network between you and the game server. That's another attack vector. You can do latency manipulation, and you can exploit game server bugs. Now, I consider those last 2 closely related. If you know better, please jump into the comments and let me know, by the way, because I'm extrapolating most of this based on what I know about systems in general, not because I've written a bunch of games. Okay, so when it comes to the PC, we're going to start at ground zero and pretend there's 0 defense and kind of work our way up towards some of the defenses employed today as I understand them. We've already talked about things like memory manipulation, everything being calculated by a program that yields a value is stored in memory. Now, if you can find the location of that value, you can change it with a program that's running on the side. You could also just patch the game code, right? Modify how the game's executable computes that value. Make the program work differently than the game maker intended. You could have a process listen to your PC's network card, look for the packets coming from the game as they leave the PC and head towards the internet, and you could modify these packets if you can reverse engineer the language that the client and the server speak. Well then, you can manipulate the commands being spoken from your PC to the game server on the fly. So instead of advancing 1 meter, I'm jumping ahead 10 meters, and so forth. So kind of zooming into the PC here, right? Like, say you're running Star Citizen, and Star Citizen is storing your position in memory, in that little square of memory. And you have another cheat program running out here on the side. This is your cheat program over here. And it knows the location that your Star Citizen program is storing that thing. And it's kind of monitoring that and manipulating it. So that if it sees it incrementing, maybe it, bumps it up a couple more points, making it go faster than you should. I'm picking on Star Citizen, but Star Citizen might not even have this exploit right now. I don't know, but like this is kind of how it works in general. Okay. Now let's jump beyond our PC. What if we run something else that sits in between our PC and the router, right? So like right here. And it does the exact same thing we were just talking about, where you know, instead of modifying the packets as they leave the PC, they wait until the packets have left the PC, they're on the way to the router, and they snatch them there, modify those packets, and then let them move along to the router and out of our home network, onto the internet, destined for the game server, right, that we're fulling. That would work too. Be basically the same thing as modifying the packets as they left the PC. Hell, in theory, that man in the middle server, which is kind of what we're describing here, that could be out on the public internet too. You know, it could be out here. You know, you could have a proxy server or something out there that you somehow route your game through on its way to the game server. You could just pay someone, route your traffic to them, and they could implement the hacks for you somehow. I don't even know if this is a thing yet or not, but like in theory, it would be possible. And you know, then there's the game server bugs way over here. You know, these can be exploited even with server authority, but again, like I said, they're also the easiest exploits and cheats to address. In most circumstances, like if these are your only exploits, you're in good shape. For example, like what if I found out that I could send commands faster than the server expected? Right, like maybe on the client they have it hard coded where, you know, they batch things up and they don't send batches of commands more than once per second. But maybe I figure out that if I hack that or I do it on my router or in front of the router, and I send 3 commands a second instead of 1 per second, and that like overruns some counter server side, and I figure out that I can move faster that way. Or maybe I can send like an intentionally malformed packet, like it expects packets in a certain structure, and I break that structure intentionally and I send it. Maybe I find out that, you know, that causes the server to fail in some way that actually benefits me. These are all examples of exploits that should lead to a quick server fix and then they're gone, right? These are the kinds of exploits that, like, once they're figured out and solved, like, there's really no way to push the issue further unless you find another bug that accomplishes the same thing. But eventually, bugs are harder and harder to find. And along these lines, we also have latency exploits. Now, game servers, they try to make our experience better by accounting for things like internet latency, disconnects. They will do things like feel bad for you when your crappy ISP starts dropping your packets, and they'll make you invincible so that you can't be killed while you're temporarily offline, right? Or they'll accept a burst of commands from you whenever you come back online so that you can catch up, right? Like maybe on your side, you don't even really notice that you've been disconnected from the game server and you're still doing things. And maybe it's just a really brief disconnect, like 5 seconds, your ISP dropped you and then everything came back. And so whenever you reconnect, the game server allows you to catch back up. It processes all the things that you did because your PC is sitting there kind of retrying. It hasn't even notified you yet. Because a lot of times our games and our programs do that intentionally too. Like, because the internet's not as reliable as you might think sometimes. Like, connections flake in and out more than you might realize because all of your programs are working to hide that fact from you. Anyway. Now, of course, since game servers are lenient and they feel bad for you and they have employed tactics to insulate you from the unreliability of the internet in general, there are assholes out there that will take advantage of this kindness. And they will either simulate disconnects or actually disconnect themselves for short periods of time in order to gain an advantage on other players. Now, I'm sure you've seen this. You're PvPing someone and they are kind of jerking around you in an unpredictable manner because they're not following like a smooth run path, you know, they're like, you see them here, and oh, they jerk over here, and oh, they jerk over there. You know, they're behind you, they're in front of you, they're hitting you 5 times all at once. Like, that's the catch-up mechanic we're talking about. Now, this experience is thanks to these generosities that we've been given by the game server, and then bad actors take advantage of that generosity. Right? One bad apple ruins the bunch, right? Okay. So now that we know a lot about the possible places our game can be attacked and the integrity compromised, much to the dismay of other players, let's talk about how we can fight back against these losers. Well, for starters, we could patch all of our server bugs, and we could remove any tolerance for lag or disconnects. Sorry, fellas, you got to upgrade your ISP if it's crappy, but worth it, right? Like, we're removing an entire class of cheat. I think it's worth it. But I guess you could get a little bit more nuanced here too, right? You could give people little affordances, but track and monitor for abuse on the server side, and kind of remove their benefit if you suspect they're enjoying these affordances too often. Maybe permanently remove that benefit if you have enough confidence in a cheating pattern. There's always going to be innocents caught by any such system. It's just the price we got to pay. Anyone here ever manage a mail server back in the day? Before Google and some of the others monopolized all email? Do you remember the old spam filters? Spam Assassin was one I used to manage. There was a whole bunch of different ones, but you'd apply all kinds of like crazy rules against inbound messages, and you'd come up with a score, and that score represented your confidence in that message being spam. Right? Similar concept. And since I'm not a game dev, I'm sure there's plenty of cons to removing these affordances that I'm not even considering. I'm just at that point where I'm willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know? I don't know about you. Anyway, let's move back to the player's home. This is where things get more involved. All because of the trust that we are placing in that player's home in order to give all players a responsive, excellent experience. We've already spoken about how players might cheat. You know, they can have programs modifying memory of the game, changing values, etc. Right? Now, how can we stop that? Well, this has been an evolving thing. By now, you all are aware of all the big anti-cheat systems that have emerged to combat this problem. Things like Warden is used by Blizzard, or Easy Anti-Cheat, which is used by a bunch of stuff, including Star Citizen and Ashes of Creation. Battle Eye, that's the one used by Dune Awakening. And of course Vanguard, which is used by Riot Games and titles like League of Legends and Valorant. And there's more. All these systems have similar goals and work in different ways to accomplish those goals. They do things like obfuscate memory, scan systems for meddling programs or known bad devices plugged in. They check for tampering with the game files and a whole lot more. All to prevent the scenarios that we've described. Now, over time, these systems have gotten ever more invasive. Vanguard takes the crown, but Easy Anti-Cheat and Battle Eye all run in Ring 0, aka kernel level, which is the most privileged layer provided by the operating system, right? So like way down here, the very root of the operating system, which also gives them maximum visibility of the system. The major difference between these three is that Vanguard runs all the time, even when you're not playing a game. When you boot your PC up and that kernel loads into memory, like Vanguard is running. Kind of crazy. The other two only run when the game is running. Easy Anti-Cheat and Dune Awakening's Battle Eye. So, of course, there's ramifications to this that I'm not going to get into here, but it's worth digging into if you're curious. Now, these anti-cheat systems have been pushed down to this level in the endless cat and mouse game that cheaters play in an ever-escalating battle to prevent them from ruining your games. But cheaters have continued to escalate as well. Right. So the problem with anti-cheat software is that it's constrained to the PC that it's running on. Right. Your anti-cheat software can't really see anything outside of that circle. So what have the cheaters done? Well, they've moved the cheat outside of the PC, of course. Right? As the anti-cheat software continued to escalate in capability, they just vacated the premise. You can now get yourself a little Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. You can stream your game video to it, for example, just as you would Twitch or Discord. And that tiny computer on your desk can plug into your PC as a mouse. And then your actual mouse can plug into it. And voila. You have a tiny PC that's watching your screen and adjusting your mouse for you. Isn't that nice? All you have to do is, get your mouse cursor close to the user and your Arduino will handle the rest. It'll land that headshot for you. It's not going to allow you to speed hack, but it sure will improve your headshot ratio. So, if we can't possibly deliver anti-cheat software that stops all of the cheating, are we doomed? Nah. This cat and mouse game will continue forever. You'll see cheaters push ahead, and then the devs will push ahead, and it'll continue forever in all likelihood. Or at least until we get that infinitely fast global network that allows everything to be purely server authoritative, and we come up with methodologies for making bulletproof code that has no exploits. Then we're good. Now, one other thing, though, and back here in the real world, that devs have going for them is that no matter how sophisticated cheaters get, the devs have the capability to see what they are doing. Everything a client does has to be told to the game server, right? Even if the server is trusting the client, it knows what the client is doing. Now, up until recently, that hasn't helped us a whole lot. But storage capacity, memory capacity, and all that just continues to get cheaper. And now, with advances in AI, reviewing large avalanches of data is getting easier too. So, one of the next frontiers will be more sophisticated behavior analysis. Servers will record how players are playing, how many headshots they're getting, how fast they're moving, and all of that. And they'll retain that data long enough to run batch behavior analysis jobs on it, right? So, it won't stop the in-the-moment cheating, but it'll ensure that more of that cheating catches up with the losers who employ such things, right? So, we zoom back out to our whole thing, and our PC is, say, we have this little Arduino sitting on our desk between me and the PC. It's plugged into the PC like a mouse. And, our video signal is streaming to the Arduino. And this might actually be two plugs, I don't know. I haven't even connected one of these. So I don't have real world experience, just rudimentary understanding based on readings online. So say we have two cables. One is the video coming to our Arduino. The other one is our mouse input going to the PC. And then here's our actual mouse on our desk that's plugged into the Arduino. So we're doing most of the work, and then the Arduino just helps correct our cursor for us when we get close to somebody's face. And all of that is being transmitted, from our PC out over the internet back to this game server. We're telling the game server what we're doing. So it's monitoring our mouse movements, our forward movements, all of that is being told to the game server. And so with batch behavior analysis, what's going to happen is that all of that data will be passed into like some service or something, written to a database or a log file, Kafka, something like that. It'll be preserved just long enough so that like your batch, like your behavior service can come in and kind of put some eyes on it, right? And using AI, like determine like how does this player stack up in our model training to global norms? Like, is this player's headshot capability in the top 0.01% of players? Is their speed on average like more than 25% higher than other players? Like, how many times have they glitched through a wall, right? Like, those models are going to be looking at this recorded data and coming up with a confidence score, like we just mentioned earlier, just like with spam, just like with our lag affordances, whatever. Like, you're coming up with a score. This is how certain I am that this user is a cheater. All right. So again, it won't stop the in-the-moment cheating, but cheating will begin to catch up with these players once we have these systems in place. Now, behavior analysis is not the only thing that's being cooked up. Work continues on things like input identification and validation, HID fingerprinting, all good things, but I don't have high hopes that, they'll do more than raise the bar. That'll eventually be circumvented again. But we got to keep raising that bar regardless, so it's good. It's all about cost and time, effort, money. Another thing is trusted path graphics. The concept here is to prevent HDMI capture or access to the video output. Also an interesting area. I feel like eventually, if they actually succeed at something like that, cheaters are just going to move on to like having a camcorder on their shoulder, watching over their shoulder and recording the actual screen. There's nothing you're going to do about that. Or maybe they'll get some like eyeball implants, wreck their eyes all in the name of winning without skill. Anyway, let's keep jumping outside of the PC. We didn't talk much about the network hacks. We kind of surface level talked about them. Now, you can imagine just like you have a Raspberry Pi sitting between your mouse and your PC, you could also have a Raspberry Pi or something like it sitting between your PC and the router, like right here. You could put a little Raspberry Pi. Now, on this Raspberry Pi, you could be running some code that understands the language and the protocols used between the game client and the game server to communicate with one another. It could be changing those packets on the way from the game PC to the game server and enabling such things as like speed hacking, jumping through walls, so forth. Ouch. Another thing that's happening outside the PC, right, that the anti-cheat software is going to have no visibility of. Now, what are we going to do about this? Well, we can sign the packets. Now, what's signing? It's a means of using cryptography to ensure the integrity of some data. As an example, if you're a web dev, you've probably heard of a JWT token. This is a little JSON string. JSON is just a data format. Hang in there with me if you're not familiar with those terms. We're going to make this clear. It's just a little bit of data that's stored in your browser as a cookie. I'm sure you know what cookies are by now, or in your browser's local storage or something. And it's used by the website that you're visiting to identify you so that you don't have to log into the website every time you visit it. YouTube's a good example, right? You don't sign in every time you visit YouTube. Now, I don't know if JWTs are actually used by YouTube. I haven't looked into it. There's other ways of allowing users the freedom to not sign in every time. but many of them don't scale as well as something like a JWT token. For example, you could just give a random session ID, and this used to be very popular back in the day, before the web got as big as it is today. But it could be a random opaque string with no meaning, right? Just a bunch of characters, and whenever a user visits, you could take that string from a cookie and you could look them up in some cache or database to verify that their session is still valid. But this has a cost, right? Every web request is placing load on the cache or the database in that case, right? So how a JWT works is it just tells the server who you are, right? This little token leaves your browser, goes to the server as you make the request, and it says, hey, I'm Grolo. No lookups required. The server doesn't have to look at a cache, it doesn't have to look at a database. It just accepts what the token is telling it. The token says, hey, this is Grolo, and the server just honors that, and it gives you Grolo's playlist. Now hold on a second. Couldn't I just modify this JWT token thing and tell it that I'm somebody else? Like, I don't know, like Asmongold. So I could get in there and take a look at his dashboards, see what I'm doing wrong with my channel. Well, no. Turns out I can't do that with JWT because the JWT token is signed. There's an encrypted string that's included with this token that tells the server that's running the website that I'm visiting that I have not tampered with the token. If I attempt to change anything with the token, that signature will no longer be valid and the site will reject my token. If I really wanted to impersonate somebody else, I would have to break into their PC or trick them into handing me their token somehow, and then I would use that to gain access. But there's a bunch of hurdles to that too, and ways of making that more challenging, not least of which is that these tokens usually have a relatively short and finite lifetime, so even if you get a hold of one, you don't have much time to use it. Things like device fingerprinting could be part of the token exchange process, or they may detect that the region the token is coming from, and if they see like a sudden change in geography, they could invalidate the token and force a reauthentication, or they could send an email or an alert to the owner asking if they're signing it from another location, right? You've all seen those alerts. All sorts of safeguards that you can put in place. Now, back to cheating in games. How about we just sign our packets like this, right? That sure would make tampering with the packets hard. Well, as it turns out, this kind of signing is part of the arsenal used against cheaters. There's one small problem. Signing anything requires a key. And you use that same key then to validate the signature later. Now, on a site like YouTube, that key is never revealed to anyone. It is safe and sound deep in Google's data center. When they give me a JWT, that JWT has already been signed. But that signing process takes time. I have to tell them who I am, I have to give them a password, probably a 2FA code, right, whenever I'm logging into YouTube, which I do like once every couple weeks or whatever. And I submit all that on a web form, and I wait a second or so, and they return me a JWT. Well, they return it to my browser. You and I aren't even thinking about it at that point, but that's how it's working. Now, if we're signing packets as they leave our game, we cannot afford that kind of latency, right? Like, when you're signing into YouTube, you can wait a second or two, no big deal. If you're having to wait that long for every packet you send out, that's a non-starter. The game wouldn't even function. So we can't afford that. I mean, we basically want to send like a bazillion packets a second. So even if we just sign a subset of all packets, it's still going to be too much latency. So what do? Well, we hand the game client the key. Oh boy. You know what that means? There's that trust thing again. We're trusting the client with the key. And of course, once it's on the client, well, it's open season. It won't take long for a cheater to pluck that key and use it to modify those packets in any way they want. Now, we can up the cost by rotating that key. Right? We can send a new key to the client every so often and force the cheating programs to constantly be checking to see if there's a new key. That'll raise the cost a little bit, but they'll manage it. If they can lift it once, they can do it 100 times, right? So all we're doing is raising the cost slightly, which, is good. We want to do that. You want to make these things as expensive and annoying as possible, but it won't stop the cheats. Now, there is something called TEE. It stands for Trusted Execution Environments. It involves enclaves on your PC CPU, right? So like way down here at the bottom of your PC, where your AMD or your Intel CPU is, like these things have these TEE enclaves. Each CPU calls them something different. I don't have all this stuff memorized, so you can go look this up. But you can use these enclaves to store and run sensitive data and code. It could be, you could certainly do something like store a key in this hidden enclave. And the way these are structured, these things cannot be observed. Like the operating system has no observability into what's going on in here, so a cheat cannot be written. The kind that we've talked about so far cannot be written to grab the key from that environment. The OS has no ability to view it. iPhones are a good example. They use enclaves like this for the fingerprint and eye systems that they employ for authenticating. So we could just store our game keys there, right? And they probably will someday soon if they're not already doing that. I don't know if any games are employing this yet or not. But at the end of the day, it just raises the bar again. And soon enough, it'll be cracked. Because your digital security is only as good as your physical security. And you're trying to defend a PC that is sitting in the player's house. There is zero physical security. So they'll crack their BIOS, they'll crack their firmware, they'll do something, and they will circumvent even the trusted execution environments eventually. But it'll raise the bar, and it should be pursued for sure. So where does that leave us? A perpetual cat and mouse game. But regardless of how those network packets are mangled, just as we discussed before, they are bound for the game server, where they can be recorded, analyzed, and that brings us back to behavior analysis. Regardless of how the exploit or cheat is employed and which vector it attacks, the truth remains, right? The game server sees you. And so this is where I'm excited to see innovation and the application of some of the tech that we're seeing emerge today. And to be clear, it's just part of the picture. All of these things that we're talking about will continue to come together to make it ever more difficult. Packet signing, tamper protection or detection, the closing of holes on the servers as they're found, the evolving behavior analysis tech, video signal encryption, prevention of plugging in unknown HDMI capture devices, sniffing out HIDs, all of that stuff will continue to play a role in this ever-changing landscape. And I would love to see I'd love to see the game makers mess with cheaters too. Let's just say this behavior analysis nails it out of the park, and they really start identifying and catching a lot of these assholes out there. I would love it if whenever your behavior analysis tool gains a super high confidence that someone is cheating, don't outright ban them immediately. Make them suffer a while. Just fuck with them, make them miss when they are clearly hitting. Make them suffer from bugs that don't even really exist. Make them fall through floors. Don't I mean, we all fall through floors in Star Citizen, but I'm saying every game. And make them fall through floors extra in Star Citizen. Make them just randomly die. Make them like super brittle so that like when another player walks past them too fast, they keel over dead. Put them in this like living hell. Make them question their sanity. Make them question the hack writers. Like, you know, a lot. I guess more and more people are buying their hacks and all this stuff. So like, make them question that process. And the cheat merchants, like, make them spend their time like double checking all of their bullshit configs and devices. Then give them a little breather. Have them thinking they figured it out, and then wham! Make it suck 10 times harder again. Why? Because. And so here we are. Should we be running around forums and Reddit screaming how the sky is falling and cheaters have won? No. This is just more of that same cat and mouse game that's been raging since it all began, right? Continuing to unfold. Should we hold game devs and studios accountable for securing their games? Hell yes. Keep pushing for fixes. Keep showing cheaters in the act whenever you catch them. Show those videos. Hold those that we're entrusting to make competitive gaming landscapes to a high standard. Expect good results. Demand good results. I, for one, would love to see more humans employed to counter this stuff. From my perspective, this used to be more common. I want the triumphant return of game masters in mass, handing out punishments like candy. But I digress. We also need to understand that games like Star Citizen and Ashes of Creation, they're in their alpha phases, right? Just because you're seeing exploits and rampant cheating now does not mean the games are built like a house of cards waiting to be blown over. And while, yes, it's true that server authority is much more resistant to cheating, don't run around claiming that any company that isn't 100% authoritative by the server is doing it wrong. I see you, Redditors. There's trade-offs to everything. Now, hopefully this video has helped to make it obvious that the defenses are layered on at various parts of the stack, and they can be layered on later in the game's development cycle, especially things like behavior analysis, you know, which is going to actually cost money to run. You're not going to do that throughout all of your development cycle unless you're testing it. And surely you wouldn't want to advertise the fact that you're testing behavior analysis, would you? And exploits will exist in alphas, betas, and even final versions of games in the form of bugs, and cheaters will be cheating, and this is all par for the course. It doesn't make it any more fun or any better if you're trying to enjoy a released game or an alpha game and you're running into this shit. It doesn't suck any less knowing that it's part of some grand cat and mouse game. I get it. That's the world we live in. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not so much. If you are a cheater and you sat through this video, well, I wish I could give you the view back. We don't want your kind around here. To everyone else, as always, I thank you so much for tuning in and participating in these chats. It continues to be a ton of fun. If you're a gamer that is looking for a community of like-minded cheater haters, follow the links below to our website or our Discord. We'd love to have you. Now, that's all I got for today. Let's jump into the comments. I look forward to discussing this topic further. I will see you all there. Grolo out.